Peter. Okay, now we're looking at Mark chapter 15. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests with the elders and scribes and the whole council held a consultation, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." And the chief priest accused him of many things. And Pilate asked him, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate wondered. King of the Jews is a Roman type. Messiah would be Jewish. This is what Pilate's interested in. You have said so. The answer is ambiguous. Jesus does not claim the title, but he also does not reject it. As in the Jewish trial, the silence of Jesus recalls the suffering servant of Isaiah. Jesus or Barabbas. At the feast, he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man named Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he was wont for them. And he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he perceived it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man whom you call the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And Pilate said, "Why, what evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. So the Jews don't want a Messiah who loves enemies. They want a man of action. Are we really so different? Preachers are fine for church, but when it comes to a commander-in-chief, when it comes to national defense, give us Barabbas. I'll read a little bit about what Brown has said on page 29 about the image of Pilate. His image changes and becomes more and more favorable as the Gospels go on. Here in the first Gospel, he says, the impression then is not one of the favorable Roman and the hostile Jew. Rather, it is of a Jesus who had no support on any side. That impression is reinforced by the gratuitous brutality of the Roman soldiers who interrupt the crucifixion process of flogging the criminal and lead him to the cross to vent their scorn on the King of the Jews. So, let's see, where was I? So that's the mockery of the soldiers. And so I don't, well, we'll go ahead and read it. The soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is the praetorium, and they called together the whole battalion. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and plaiting a crown of thorns, they put it on him, and they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck his head with a reed and spat upon him, and they knelt down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put on his clothes, and they led him out to crucify him. And once again, the image of spitting recalls the scripture of the suffering servant who does not shield his face from blows and spitting. They compelled a certain passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. Now, Mark and Luke keep the mention of Simon of Cyrene, but do not mention his sons. Perhaps Alexander and Rufus were known to Mark's community. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. And it was the third hour when they crucified him. And the description of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified two robbers, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." So also the chief priests mocked him to one another with the scribes, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also reviled him. The first thing I'm going to mention, I forgot to put it right here in the notes, but contrast the amount of ink on the crucifixion. And they crucified him. And the amount of ink spent on the mockery. Like after you put nails in someone's hands and feet and crucified them on a cross, what difference does it make if you wag your head and yeah? Okay, that's again the not focusing on the pain of the cross, but the shame of the cross. Everyone would recognize the allusion to Psalm 22, where all who pass by wagged their heads. They divided my garments among them. So all of this, the emphasis is not on the pain, but on the shame, and they take care of the shame by using scriptural imagery. The third to the 6 hours, that's 9 to noon, Jesus endures mockery by 3 groups. First, those who pass by. Second, the chief priests and the scribes. 3, those crucified with him. This mockery is unrelieved. Luke modifies the mockery by having the story of the good thief who repents, but there is no relief. Both of those crucified with him mock him in Mark. Mark's Jesus is totally surrounded by enemies. There's not a sympathetic person near him. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders hearing it said, "Behold, he's calling Elijah." And one ran and filling a sponge full of vinegar, put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let's see whether," something must have been left out, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that he thus breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." Now, the 6th hour to the 9th hour, that's noon to 3 in the afternoon. Jesus had been crucified at the 3rd hour. So Mark puts Jesus on the cross for 6 hours, from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. The first 3 hours are mockery by 3 different groups. The second 3 hours are darkness. And Brown points out this is probably an allusion to Amos, chapter 8, verse 9, of the sun setting at noon, leaving the earth in darkness. My God, my God. Brown notes that here, yes, Jesus is reciting the first line of a psalm, but he's not calling God Father. He doesn't call Yahweh God, Father. He calls him God. These words from Psalm 22 are the only words the Markan Jesus says from the cross. There's a pious devotion of the 7 last words of Jesus that blends sayings from all the Gospels, but this ignores the utter desolation of Jesus in Mark. He's surrounded only by enemies. Everybody is mocking him. And the only words he says, my God, my God. Uh, he, when he says Eloi, some people mistake that for Elijah. In Mark, John the Baptist has fulfilled the role of Elijah. He came not to deliver Jesus, but to suffer a martyr's death that would prefigure the violent death of Jesus himself. Jesus uttered a loud cry. Could we translate that? He screamed. The Markan death scene is horrific. Brown sees an allusion to the prophet Joel in chapter 2. Before them, the earth trembles, the heavens shake, sun and moon are darkened, and their stars withhold their brightness. And in chapter 4, the Lord roars from Zion, cried out in the land. The Lord roars from Zion, and from Jerusalem raises his voice. The heavens and the earth quake. The curtain is torn. Some have interpreted this benevolently. It's the curtain that divides Jews from Gentiles. More likely, it's not a benevolent interpretation. More likely, this is a condemnation that Mark is pointing out. The destruction of the temple has begun with the ripping of the temple. As in Ezekiel, as in the prophet Ezekiel, the Lord is leaving the temple. If you want to know, if you had asked Ezekiel, how could the Babylonians destroy God's house? He didn't live there anymore. And if you want to ask Mark, how could the Romans destroy God's house? Mark's answer would have been, he didn't live there anymore. Now, not every early Christian took it that way. In Acts, we read that after the resurrection, that they were praying daily in the temple. Well, if they didn't think God still lived there, they wouldn't have been doing that. But for Mark, the destruction has begun and God is absent. There were also women looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the Younger, and of Joses and Salome, who, when he was in Galilee, followed him and ministered to him, and also many other women who came up to him with Jerusalem. This is the first time women disciples are mentioned in Mark. Jesus is already dead. Until this point, Mark's reader could have imagined the entire ministry of Jesus as a guy thing. Mark's reader could have thought of the Last Supper as a stag party. Now the reader is challenged to reimagine the whole story with women present throughout. They were there back in Galilee. They came up to Jerusalem, and although the guys have fled and are gone, we won't hear of them again. The women are there. The Son of God. The centurion is the first human being to confess this. The reader has known the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, has known Jesus as Son of God from the first verse. Only now is it possible correctly to understand what Son of God means. A portrayal of Jesus as a wise teacher, healer, miracle worker is not enough. Any portrayal of Son of God that omits the cross is not the Son of God that Mark preaches. This is not necessarily a proclamation of divine nature. Son of God was a title that every anointed king of Israel, Messiah, Christos, had borne. After the resurrection, Christians will understand this title, which had been given to all the previous kings of Israel. They will understand it in a deeper sense than the Old Testament understanding. Mark knows that his readers will hear the words of the centurion with 2020 post-resurrectional insight. They will have a deeper understanding of Son of God than the Old Testament did, but it's still centuries until we get to the 4th century creed, true God from true God, one in being from the Father. This is a very early Christian understanding of Son of God. And then the burial. I'm running short on time, so I won't read it. Joseph of Arimathea. Unlike later Gospels, Mark does not portray him as a disciple of Jesus. He's simply a pious Jew who does the right thing. Remember the story of Tobit. One of the things that he did was to bury the dead. And even if someone had been executed, Tobit would bury them. So it's a pious Jewish thing, even if someone is a condemned criminal, to give them a decent burial. Pilate is surprised Jesus had died after only 6 hours. Sometimes criminals were on the cross for days. And Brown has another remark on page 33. At the close of the narrative, only Mark, among the synoptics, tells us that Pilate checked whether Jesus was dead. The emphasis might be a sign that already Christian apologists were wrestling with the claim that Jesus was not really dead. He had been revived by the chill of the tomb, a charge that would be given new emphasis by 18th and 19th century rationalists. Okay, rationalists, they tried to preserve the appearances. If you were there with a video camera, this is what you would have seen, but they remove everything miraculous from the story and they give it a rational explanation. So the Christian teaching is not that that Jesus returned to this life. The rationalists have a complete misunderstanding of what the Christian proclamation is. He doesn't return to this existence. He has a new and glorious form of existence. Let's see. The holy women are the same ones who will discover the empty tomb. Mark's passion narrative points forward to the resurrection. And I'm going to stop our recording here.